The night sky on Kepler Prime crackled with electric fury as Private Kim Tae-ho walked his patrol route around Forward Base Delta. Purple lightning split the darkness every few seconds, and the air smelled like burnt metal. This wasn't his first ion storm, but something felt different tonight. The usual hum of security sensors had gone silent 20 minutes ago, leaving the base blind and vulnerable. Tae-ho pulled his jacket tighter against the cold wind. 3 months on this frozen rock, and he still wasn't used to how the storms made his skin tingle. The war with the Zephyrians had been going on for 2 years, but out here on the frontier it felt like forever. Most days he just wanted to go home to Seoul and eat his grandmother's kimchi soup. A flash of movement caught his eye near the tree line. Tae-ho raised his rifle and squinted through the darkness. The next lightning strike revealed a figure stumbling through the dead grass, clearly struggling to stay upright. His finger moved to the trigger as he recognized the telltale silver gleam of Zephyrian skin. The alien woman took 3 more steps before collapsing just 20 meters from his tent. Tae-ho's training screamed at him to radio for backup, to sound the alarm, to follow protocol. Enemy contact meant immediate response. But as he watched her try to crawl forward, leaving dark stains on the ground behind her, something made him hesitate. She wasn't carrying weapons. Her clothes were torn and bloody. Whatever had happened to her, she wasn't here to fight. Tae-ho looked back toward the main base. In this storm, with communications down, it would take at least 10 minutes for help to arrive. The alien woman didn't look like she had 10 minutes. Her breathing was shallow and rapid, and those stains on the ground were definitely blood. Making a decision that went against everything he'd been taught, Tae-ho slung his rifle and ran toward her. Up close, he could see the intricate patterns of light that ran along her arms and neck, now flickering weakly like dying Christmas lights. Her silver skin was pale, almost gray, and her normally bright blue eyes were clouded with pain. "Hey," he said softly, kneeling beside her. "Can you understand me?" She turned her head slightly, focusing on his face with obvious effort. When she tried to speak, only a weak whistle came out. The translator device attached to her collar was cracked and sparking. Another massive lightning bolt lit up the sky, and Tae-ho realized they were both completely exposed. If Zephyrian patrols were looking for her, they'd spot them easily. If his own people saw him helping an enemy soldier, he'd be facing a court-martial. Without thinking it through any further, he slipped his arms under her shoulders and knees, lifting her as gently as possible. She was lighter than he expected, her bones feeling almost hollow like a bird's. The luminous markings on her skin pulsed brighter for a moment when he touched her, then dimmed again. His tent was small and basic, just a cot, a field desk, and his personal gear. Tae-ho laid her on his sleeping bag and grabbed his medical kit. His hands shook slightly as he opened it. 3 months of basic first aid training was about to be tested on an alien biology he knew nothing about. The woman's eyes followed his movements as he cleaned her wounds with antiseptic wipes. When he pressed gauze against a deep cut on her arm, she made a sound that might have been gratitude in any language. Her skin felt warm and slightly electric, like touching a battery. Outside, the storm continued to rage, and Tae-ho wondered what he'd gotten himself into. The damaged translator on Yuna's collar crackled to life after Tae-ho managed to reconnect a loose wire. Her first words came out distorted and mechanical, but he could make out the basics. "Thank you, human soldier," the device stammered in broken Korean before switching to heavily accented English. "My name is difficult for your mouth," she said, touching her throat gently. "Your people, they call me Yuna, is close enough." Her real name sounded like wind chimes mixed with static when she tried to say it, full of tones and frequencies that human vocal cords couldn't reproduce. Tae-ho sat cross-legged on the floor of his tent, keeping his voice low as the storm continued. Outside. "I'm Kim Tae-ho. Why are you running? Your people, they don't usually travel alone." Yuna's luminous markings flickered brighter when she became agitated, like a mood ring made of living light. She struggled to sit up, wincing as the movement pulled at her bandaged wounds. "Not all Zephyrians want war," she said, her words coming slowly as the translator worked to keep up. "Some of us, we see different path." She reached into a hidden pocket in her torn clothing and pulled out a small crystalline device that pulsed with soft blue light. I carry information, very dangerous information. My own leaders, they hunt me for this. What kind of information? Taeho asked, though part of him wasn't sure he wanted to know. Yuna held the crystal up to the light. Plans to destroy human colonies, not just military targets, civilian worlds, places where your children live. Her voice grew heavy with sadness. Hardline faction believes only way to win is to eliminate all humans. Complete extinction. The words hit Taeho like a punch to the stomach. He thought about his little sister back on Earth, only 16, and dreaming of becoming a teacher. He thought about the families living on the outer colonies, farming and building new lives while the war raged in distant systems. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked. "We're supposed to be enemies." Yuna's translator made soft clicking sounds as she searched for the right words. "Because some wars are wrong, because killing children is wrong no matter what species they are." She looked directly at him, her blue eyes intense. "You could have killed me when you found me. You could have called your soldiers. Instead, you gave me water and healed my wounds. This tells me what kind of person you are." Outside, thunder rolled across the sky, and Taeho could hear the distant sound of patrol vehicles starting up. The storm was beginning to weaken, which meant his base would be back to full operations soon. Someone would notice he wasn't at his post. "The data in this crystal," Yuna continued, "it shows more than just attack plans. It shows who is really behind this war. Humans and Zephyrians working together to keep fighting going. They make money from weapons, from supplies, from rebuilding what gets destroyed." "That's impossible," Taeho said automatically. But even as he spoke, he remembered some of the things he'd noticed. Supply shipments that never seemed to run out. Equipment that broke down just often enough to need replacing. Officers who seemed more interested in prolonging campaigns than winning them. Yuna smiled sadly. "Your species and mine, we are not so different. We both have people who choose profit over peace." She gestured between them. "But we also have people like us. People who want the killing to stop." The radio in Taeho's tent crackled to life as the base communications came back online. He had maybe 5 minutes before someone noticed his absence. From patrol. Looking at Yuna, her silver skin still pale from blood loss, he made another decision that would change everything. "What do you need me to do?" Yuna activated the crystal device, and holographic images filled the small tent with blue light. Taeho stared in disbelief at what he was seeing. The first image showed a human officer in a military uniform he didn't recognize, shaking hands with a Zephyrian in elaborate robes. Both were smiling like old friends. "This meeting happened 3 weeks ago," Yuna explained, her translator working more smoothly now. "Human weapons dealer selling advanced plasma rifles to Zephyrian extremists, same weapons that killed 20 of your soldiers last month." Taeho's blood ran cold. He remembered that attack. His friend Park Dong-woo had been in that squad. They'd found him with a plasma burn through his chest, killed by a weapon that should have been impossible for Zephyrians to obtain. The next image made his stomach turn. Financial records showing massive money transfers between human and Zephyrian. Accounts, millions of credits changing hands regularly. "War is very profitable business," Yuna said bitterly. "Someone builds weapons, someone else buys them, everyone gets rich except the soldiers who die." "But why would they want to keep the war going?" Taeho asked, though he was starting to understand. "Peace means no more weapon sales, no more military contracts, no more emergency funding from frightened governments." Yuna swiped to another image. "Your people rebuild destroyed colonies. My people rebuild destroyed cities. Same companies get contracts for both sides." The evidence was overwhelming. Shipping manifests showing human medical supplies being diverted to Zephyrian black markets. Battle plans that were clearly designed to create stalemates rather than victories. Communication logs between human and Zephyrian officials discussing how to maintain optimal conflict levels. "Look at this," Yuna said, pulling up a video recording. The image was grainy, but Taeho could clearly see a human colonel sitting across from a Zephyrian commander. They were discussing casualty numbers, like they were talking about quarterly sales reports. "We need to increase engagement in Sector 7, the colonel was saying. Headquarters is asking questions about why the war is taking so long. The Zephyrian commander nodded. My people are getting restless too. Perhaps a few more colony raids, nothing too devastating, just enough to maintain anger levels. Tae-ho felt sick. These people were discussing his friends' lives like they were chess pieces. How long has this been going on? Since the war began, Yuna replied. Maybe even before the attack on your Earth station that started everything. The evidence suggests it was planned by extremists from both sides. The implications hit him like a truck. 2 years of war, thousands of dead soldiers, entire colonies destroyed, and it was all orchestrated by people who were supposed to be protecting them. His hands shook as he thought about every friend he'd lost, every family torn apart by this conflict. We have to stop this, he said. Yes, but how? If we go to your commanders, some of them might be involved. If I go to mine, they will kill me. For treason. Yuna's markings pulsed with frustration. We need more evidence, names, dates, proof that cannot be denied. Tae-ho's radio crackled again. His squad leader was calling for position reports. He had to respond or risk suspicion. I need to get back to patrol, he said, but we can't let this go. Meet me tomorrow night, Yuna said, already preparing to leave. Same time, at the old communications tower 2 kilometers north. I will bring more evidence. As she gathered her things, Tae-ho noticed something that made his blood freeze. Through a gap in his tent, he could see a figure watching from the shadows near the command bunker. Someone had been observing them, and they'd just witnessed a human soldier helping an enemy alien. Yuna, he whispered urgently, but she was already slipping out into the darkness. Captain Park Jin-woo had been watching Tae-ho for 3 days now, and something wasn't right. The young private was acting strange, distracted during briefings. Twice he'd been caught staring off toward the northern perimeter, with an odd expression on his face. Jin-woo had commanded soldiers for 15 years, and he knew the signs of someone hiding something. Kim Tae-ho, Jin-woo called out as Tae-ho finished his morning patrol. A word. Tae-ho's heart hammered as he approached his captain. Had someone seen Yuna leaving his tent? Did they know about their planned meeting tonight? He tried to keep his expression neutral, but Jin-woo's sharp eyes missed nothing. You've been different lately, Jin-woo said, circling around Tae-ho like a predator studying prey. Jumpy, nervous. Last night, Corporal Kim Min-seok said you weren't at your post for 20 minutes during the storm. Care to explain? I was checking the perimeter sensors, sir, Tae-ho replied, hoping his voice sounded steady. The storm damaged some equipment. Jin-woo nodded slowly, but his expression remained skeptical. Funny thing about those sensors. I checked with maintenance this morning. They said nobody reported any damage. He stepped closer, close enough that Tae-ho could smell the coffee on his breath. So, I'll ask again. Where were you? Before Tae-ho could answer, an alert siren began wailing across the base. Both men turned toward the communication center, where soldiers were running in all directions. A voice crackled over the intercom. All units to battle stations. Zephyrian infiltrator detected in Sector 7. Jin-woo's eyes narrowed. Sector 7, that's your patrol area, isn't it, Private? Meanwhile, 2 kilometers away, Yuna was learning exactly how dangerous her situation had become. The figure hunting her through the forest moved with predatory grace, and she recognized the distinctive gait even before she saw the face. Lee Hai-jin had been captured by Zephyrians 3 years ago and somehow turned into their most effective human tracker. You can't run forever, little traitor, Hai-jin called out in perfect Zephyrian, her voice carrying an unnatural electronic quality. The modifications they'd made to her throat allowed her to speak both languages flawlessly. My masters want you alive, but they didn't say you had to be unharmed. Yuna pressed herself against a tree, trying to control her breathing. Hee-jin was good, but she had advantages the human couldn't match. Her natural camouflage abilities were kicking in, her skin automatically adjusting to match the bark behind her. To human eyes, she would be nearly invisible, but Hai-jin wasn't entirely human anymore. The cybernetic implants behind her eyes glowed softly in the darkness, scanning for heat signatures and electrical patterns. I can smell your fear, she taunted, the same way I could smell it on that human soldier you've been meeting with. Yuna's blood turned to ice. They knew about Tae-ho. Her markings flickered with panic before she forced them to dim. She had to warn him somehow. Back at the base, Jin Woo was assembling a patrol unit. "Corporal Lee So-young, take your squad and sweepy. The northern perimeter. If there's a Zephyrian out there, I want it found." He turned to Tae-ho with a cold smile. "You'll be joining us, Private. After all, you know that area better than anyone." The patrol moved out just as the sun was setting, exactly when Tae-ho was supposed to meet Yuna at the old communications tower. He tried to think of a way to warn her, but Jin Woo stayed close, watching his every move. They were halfway to the tower when Yuna appeared on the ridge above them, her form shimmering like heat waves. She'd managed to escape He-jin, but now she was trapped between two human patrols. Tae-ho saw her first and felt his heart stop. "Contact!" shouted Corporal Lee So-young, raising her rifle. In that split second, Yuna did something that made every human soldier freeze in amazement. Her body seemed to bend light around itself, becoming translucent, then nearly invisible. She moved like liquid shadow, flowing between the trees so smoothly that the soldiers couldn't track her movement. "What the hell was that?" someone whispered. Jin Woo grabbed Tae-ho's arm, his grip like iron. "Interesting reaction you had there, Private. Most soldiers would have raised their weapons, but you looked like you were trying to warn it." Tae-ho met his captain's suspicious gaze, knowing that his secret was hanging by a thread. Over the next 2 weeks, Tae-ho and Yuna managed to save hundreds of lives without anyone knowing they were working together. Their first success came when Yuna warned him about a planned attack on the water treatment facility. Tae-ho couldn't reveal his source, so he reported it as suspicious activity he'd noticed during patrol. The base went on high alert, and the Zephyrian strike team found heavily defended positions instead of the easy target they'd expected. The second attack they stopped was even more significant. Yuna's intelligence revealed that extremists planned to poison the food supplies heading to Colony 7, a peaceful settlement with over 10,000 civilians. Tae-ho had to be creative this time, pretending to discover contaminated supplies. During a routine inspection, when the medical team tested the food, they found traces of a deadly Zephyrian biotoxin that would have killed thousands. Their third victory came when they prevented a false flag operation designed to make it look like Zephyrians had attacked a human medical convoy. Tae-ho managed to reroute the convoy at the last minute, claiming engine troubles. The Zephyrian extremists ended up attacking empty vehicles, while the real medical supplies reached their destination safely. But success came with a price. Too many convenient discoveries were making people ask questions. Colonel Song Min-ho had been watching the situation develop with growing concern. As base commander, he noticed patterns that others missed. Every time Private Kim Tae-ho made one of his lucky discoveries, the war seemed to take a step back from total chaos. That wasn't supposed to happen. "Private Kim," Min-ho called out, as Tae-ho was heading to the mess hall. "My office, now." Tae-ho's stomach dropped as he followed the colonel into the command center. Min-ho's office was spartanly decorated, with only a few personal photos and his military commendations on the walls. But Tae-ho noticed something that made his blood run cold, a small crystalline device on the desk that looked exactly like Zephyrian technology. "Sit down," Min-ho said, closing the door behind them. "We need to talk about your recent performance." "Sir, 3 major incidents prevented in 2 weeks. That's either incredible luck or incredible intelligence." Min-ho leaned back in his chair, studying Tae-ho's face. "I'm betting on intelligence. The question is, where are you getting it?" Tae-ho's mind raced. He couldn't reveal Yuna's existence, but he needed a believable explanation. "I've just been more careful on patrol, sir, watching for unusual patterns, checking things twice." Min-ho smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Careful. Yes, that's one way to put it." He leaned forward. "Here's what I think is happening. I think you've made contact with someone on the other side, someone feeding you information." The accusation hung in the air like a loaded weapon. Tae-ho forced himself to remain calm. "That's not true, sir. Relax, Private. I'm not accusing you of treason." Min-ho's tone suddenly became friendly, almost fatherly. "In fact, I want to help. If you've established some kind of back-channel communication, that could be incredibly valuable for peace negotiations." Tae-ho blinked in surprise. This wasn't the reaction he'd expected. I've been in contact with some moderate Zephyrian leaders, Minho continued. They're interested in secret peace talks, away from the extremists on both sides. If your contact is legitimate, we might be able to arrange a meeting. Hope flickered in Taeho's chest. Could it really be this simple? Could there be other people in command who wanted peace? There's an old mining station about 15 kilometers north of here, Minho said, pulling up a map on his computer. Abandoned. For years, but the structure is still sound. Perfect for a discreet meeting. If your contact is interested in real peace, have them meet you there tomorrow night at midnight. Taeho nodded eagerly. I'll see what I can do, sir. Good man. Minho stood up and patted Taeho on the shoulder. This could be the beginning of something historic. Just remember, absolute secrecy is essential. If the extremists find out about this meeting, they'll do everything they can to stop it. As Taeho left the office, he felt lighter than he had in weeks. Finally, someone in authority was on their side. Finally, there might be a path to real peace. He never noticed Minho activating a secure communication device as soon as the door closed, or the satisfied smile that crossed the colonel's face as he began typing a message to his Zephyrian contacts. The trap was set. The abandoned mining station stood like a metal skeleton against the night sky, its rusted towers reaching toward the stars. Taeho arrived first, his heart pounding with nervous excitement. After weeks of secret meetings and hidden intelligence, they finally had a chance for real peace talks. Colonel Minho had seemed genuinely interested in ending the bloodshed, and Yuna had been cautiously optimistic when he'd told her about the meeting. Yuna materialized from the shadows 15 minutes later, her natural camouflage fading as she stepped into the moonlight. "This place feels wrong," she said, her luminous markings flickering with anxiety. "Too quiet, too exposed. Colonel Minho chose it because it's isolated," Taeho replied, though he was starting to feel uneasy too. No chance of extremists from either side interfering. They made their way to the main building, a large processing facility with broken windows and twisted metal beams. Inside, their footsteps echoed in the empty space. Taeho checked his watch. 11:58 p.m. Almost time. "Where are these moderate leaders you mentioned?" Yuna asked, scanning the darkness with her enhanced vision. Before Taeho could answer, the building erupted in blinding floodlights. Powerful beams cut through the darkness from every direction, turning the abandoned facility into a blazing arena. Both of them threw up their hands to shield their eyes, temporarily blinded. "Well, well," came Colonel Minho's voice over a loudspeaker. "The little traitors finally show themselves." Taeho's blood turned to ice as he realized what was happening. Through the glare, he could make out human soldiers positioned on the catwalks above, their rifles trained on him and Yuna. But that wasn't the worst part. From the opposite side of the building, Zephyrian warriors were emerging from concealment, their weapons gleaming in the harsh light. "You see," Minho's voice continued, "we couldn't have you two running around preventing perfectly good attacks. War is profitable, peace is not, so we decided to solve two problems at once." Yuna's translator crackled as she spoke rapidly in her own language, and Taeho heard responding voices from the Zephyrian forces. Her markings flashed bright red with anger and betrayal. "They're telling my people that I've been selling military secrets to humans," she said, her voice shaking with rage. "That you've been my handler this whole time, and they're telling my people that I've been feeding information to Zephyrian terrorists," Taeho replied, understanding flooding through him. "This whole thing was designed to make us both look like traitors. The trap was perfect." To the human soldiers, it looked like their fellow soldier had been caught red-handed meeting with an enemy agent. To the Zephyrians, it appeared their scout had been captured while conducting espionage. Both sides would want them dead, and no one would question what happened here. "Open fire," Minho commanded. The building exploded with weapons fire from both sides. Plasma bolts and projectile rounds filled the air, but Taeho noticed something crucial. The humans and Zephyrians weren't shooting at each other. They were only targeting him and Yuna. "This way," Yuna shouted, grabbing Taeho's arm and pulling him toward a maintenance shaft she'd spotted with her superior night vision. Her camouflage abilities kicked in, making her partially invisible. As they ran, They dove into the narrow tunnel just as the floor where they'd been standing exploded under concentrated fire. The shaft was barely wide enough for one person, filled with rusty pipes and electrical conduits. They crawled frantically through the darkness while voices shouted orders above them. "There!" someone yelled in Korean. "The maintenance tunnel." "Seal." "The exit!" came a reply in Zephyrian. They were coordinating their efforts, Taeho realized. This wasn't just a trap. It was a joint operation between the very people who were supposed to be enemies. The tunnel led to an old drainage system that dumped them into a rocky creek bed half a kilometer from the facility. They emerged muddy, hand-bruised but alive. Behind them, searchlights swept the area while aircraft circled overhead. "We can't go back to either of our bases," Yuna said, checking a cut on her arm. "They'll shoot us on sight now." Taeho nodded grimly. In one night, they'd gone from secret allies to hunted fugitives. His own military would brand him a deserter and traitor. Her people would execute her for espionage. They had nowhere to run, no one to trust. "At least we know the truth now," he said. "Minho and whoever he's working with, they're not just prolonging the war. They're actively managing it, controlling both sides. The question is, what do we do about it?" Yuna asked as the sound of search teams grew closer. They looked at each other in the moonlight, two soldiers from opposing armies who now had only one thing left: each other. Living as fugitives for 3 days had taught Taeho and Yuna to work as a perfect team. They moved through the wilderness like ghosts, using Yuna's camouflage abilities and Taeho's knowledge of human patrol patterns to stay hidden. But hiding wasn't enough anymore. They needed proof that would expose the conspiracy to both their peoples. Their breakthrough came when Yuna intercepted an encrypted Zephyrian communication while they sheltered in an abandoned weather station. Her translator worked overtime as she decoded the message, her markings pulsing with excitement. "There's a meeting tonight," she whispered, showing Taeho the holographic display. "Major Choi Ji-hoon from your military and someone called Kang Soo-jin from mine. They're discussing a big weapons shipment." Taeho recognized the name immediately. Ji-hoon runs logistics for the entire sector. If he's involved in illegal arms dealing, that explains how Zephyrian forces keep getting advanced human technology. The meeting was scheduled for midnight at an old cargo depot 20 kilometers south of their position. It was heavily guarded territory, crawling with both human and Zephyrian patrols, but it was also their best chance to get concrete evidence. They spent hours planning their approach. Yuna would use her natural abilities to get them close, while Taeho's military training would help them navigate the security systems. They had one recording device between them, a small unit Yuna had salvaged from her original equipment. The cargo depot was a massive complex of warehouses and loading docks, lit by harsh industrial lights that created deep shadows between the buildings. Perfect for infiltration, but also perfect for ambushes. They moved carefully from shadow to shadow, Yuna's skin automatically adjusting to match their surroundings. "There," Taeho pointed to a warehouse at the center of the complex. "Extra guards at that building. That has to be it." They crept closer, using Yuna's enhanced hearing to avoid patrol routes. Through a grimy window, they could see the meeting in progress. Major Choi Ji-hoon sat across from a tall Zephyrian female whose elaborate robes marked her as high-ranking. Nobility. Kang Soo-jin spoke with the measured authority of someone used to giving orders. "The plasma rifle shipment arrived on schedule," Ji-hoon was saying as they activated their recording device. 500 units, just as promised. Your forces should have no trouble breaking through the defensive lines at Colony 12. "Excellent," Soo-jin replied in perfect Korean. "And the defensive positions for that colony? Your intelligence was accurate?" Ji-hoon smiled coldly. "Of course. I helped plan them myself. The West Wall has a blind spot that your forces can exploit. Should make for a very dramatic battle. The news coverage will be spectacular." Taeho felt sick listening to them discuss the deaths of his fellow soldiers, like they were planning an entertainment show. These weren't just arms dealers. They were orchestrating specific battles for maximum impact. "What about the peace talks some of the moderates are pushing for?" Soo-jin asked. "Handled," Ji-hoon replied. "We've identified the key figures on both sides who might actually succeed in ending hostilities. They'll be eliminated quietly, made to look like casualties of war. Like those 2 troublemakers from last week?" Soo-jin laughed. The human private and the Zephyrian scout. Very neat work, making them look like traitors to both sides. They're still alive, Ji-hoon said darkly. But not for long. We have teams hunting them. That's when disaster struck. A security guard, making his rounds, spotted them crouched by the window. His shout of alarm echoed across the depot, and suddenly every light in the complex blazed to life. "Run!" Tae-ho yelled, grabbing the recording device. The warehouse exploded with activity as armed guards poured out of hidden positions. Ji-hoon and Soo-jin's voices could be heard over the chaos, screaming orders to capture the infiltrators alive. Yuna's alien abilities kicked into overdrive. Her camouflage made her nearly invisible as she darted between shipping containers, but the security forces had thermal scanners that could track her heat signature. Tae-ho used his military training to predict their movements, calling out warnings and directions as they fled through the maze of warehouses. "Left, 3 guards coming around that corner," he shouted. Yuna flowed like liquid shadow, her body bending and twisting in ways that seemed impossible. She could flatten herself against walls, slip through gaps barely wider than her shoulders, and move so silently that even the enhanced hearing devices their pursuers carried couldn't track her. But there were too many of them. Human soldiers, with advanced weapons, worked alongside Zephyrian hunters with their own technological advantages. The 2 fugitives found themselves surrounded in a loading bay with nowhere to run. "Surrender!" Ji-hoon's voice boomed over loudspeakers. "For you have evidence of nothing. No one will believe 2 traitors." That's when Yuna did something that amazed even Tae-ho. Her markings flared brilliantly, creating a blinding flash that overloaded every optical sensor in the area. In the confusion, she grabbed Tae-ho and they dove through a skylight, using her species' ability to absorb kinetic impact to survive the 3-story fall. They hit the ground running, the precious recording clutched in Tae-ho's hands, with an army of enemies in pursuit and nowhere safe to hide. The old communications relay station had been abandoned for 2 years, but its massive transmitter array still reached into space like metallic fingers grasping at the stars. Tae-ho and Yuna had been running for 18 hours straight, dodging kill teams from both species, and this forgotten facility was their last hope. "The power's been cut," Tae-ho said, examining the main control panel with his flashlight. "But the backup generators might still work." Yuna was already moving through the darkness, her luminous markings providing just enough light to navigate the cluttered room. Her enhanced vision picked out details that Tae-ho couldn't see. "Here," she called softly, "emergency power systems are intact." They worked frantically to restore power, knowing that their pursuers couldn't be far behind. Every few minutes, one of them would glance toward the windows, expecting to see armed figures approaching through the night. The weight of the recording device in Tae-ho's pocket felt like it might crush him. "Got it," Yuna whispered as the generators hummed to life. Banks of equipment began glowing with status lights, and the main transmitter started its startup sequence. "How long until it's ready?" Tae-ho asked, his fingers dancing over the communication controls. His military training included basic radio operations, but this was far more complex than anything he'd used before. 3 minutes for full power," Yuna replied, monitoring the alien text on her translator. "But we need to reach both human and Zephyrian networks simultaneously. If we only broadcast to one side, they'll dismiss it as enemy propaganda." That was the genius of their plan, born from desperation during their flight through the forest. A single broadcast to both civilizations at once, revealing the conspiracy in the conspirators' own words. No one could claim it was faked if both sides received identical evidence. The sound of vehicles approaching made them both freeze. Through the windows, they could see lights moving up the access road. Their time was running out. "I can set up a delayed transmission," Tae-ho said, his hands shaking as he worked. "Upload the recording, then program it to broadcast automatically. Even if they stop us, the evidence will still get out." "How long?" Yuna asked, watching the approaching lights grow brighter. 2 minutes for upload, then 30 seconds to reach both networks." The lights were getting closer. Yuna could hear the distinctive whine of Zephyrian hover vehicles mixed with the rumble of human ground transports. They'd brought everything. They had. "There," Tae-ho announced as the upload completed. Broadcasting in 30 seconds. That's when the first shots rang out. The windows of the relay station exploded inward as both human and Zephyrian forces opened fire. Taeho and Yuna dove behind a bank of equipment as plasma bolts and projectile rounds filled the air around them. 15 seconds, Taeho shouted. Over the noise, the main door exploded off its hinges as soldiers from both species poured into the building. But something strange was happening. Instead of coordinating their attack like they had at the mining station, the human and Zephyrian forces were eyeing each other suspiciously. 10 seconds, Major Choi Ji-hoon's voice cut through the chaos. Destroy that transmitter, now! But Kang Soo-jin was shouting orders in Zephyrian, and her soldiers were hesitating. They'd been told this was a joint operation, but seeing human, forces here made them wonder if they were walking into a trap. 5 seconds. The transmission began. Across human space and Zephyrian territory, the recording started playing on every communication network simultaneously. Ji-hoon and Soo-jin's voices filled the airwaves, discussing their illegal weapons deals, their manipulation of battles, their plans to eliminate peace negotiators. "What is this?" demanded a Zephyrian commander, his translator picking up the human voices discussing selling weapons to Zephyrian extremists. "Some kind of setup," replied a human sergeant, hearing Zephyrian voices planning attacks on human colonies. But as the recording continued, both sides began to understand what they were really hearing. These weren't enemy communications intercepted during battle. These were their own leaders, working together to keep the war going for profit. The fighting stopped as soldiers from both species listened in stunned silence to the evidence of betrayal. They heard Ji-hoon laugh about sending human soldiers into deliberately planned ambushes. They heard Soo-jin discussing which Zephyrian units to sacrifice for maximum dramatic effect. "This is impossible," whispered a human corporal. "Our own leaders," said a Zephyrian warrior, his voice hollow with shock. The broadcast reached the highest levels of both governments within minutes. Emergency sessions were called on Earth and the Zephyrian homeworld. Within hours, arrest warrants were issued for dozens of officials on both sides. But in the communication station, Taeho and Yuna faced a new problem. The soldiers surrounding them were no longer following orders from their compromised commanders. Some wanted to arrest them as traitors. Others wanted to protect them as heroes. The confusion was creating a dangerous standoff. "We need to get out of here," Yuna whispered, "before someone decides to shoot first and ask questions later." Through the chaos, they could hear Ji-hoon screaming into his radio, demanding immediate extraction. But no one was listening to him anymore. The truth was out, but their fight for survival was just beginning. The arrests began within 6 hours of the broadcast. Taeho watched from his detention cell as military police led Colonel Song Min-ho away in handcuffs, the man who had tried to have them killed now looking smaller and more pathetic than ever. Major Choi Ji-hoon followed an hour later, his confident smirk replaced by the pale face of someone who knew his career was over. "Unprecedented," General Park Woo-jin kept saying as she reviewed Taeho's case file. "In 30 years of military service, I've never seen anything like this." Taeho sat across from the tribunal panel, still wearing his prison uniform, while lawyers on both sides argued about his fate. Half the military wanted to execute him for treason. The other half wanted to give him a medal for exposing the conspiracy. The confusion was so complete that nobody knew what to do with him. "The defendant did communicate with enemy forces," argued the prosecutor. "By regulation, that constitutes grounds for court-martial, regardless of his intentions." "Your Honor," replied Taeho's defense attorney, "my client prevented 3 major attacks that would have killed thousands of civilians. He exposed a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of command. Without his actions, this war would have continued indefinitely." The breakthrough came when an unexpected witness appeared via holographic link. High Commander Zaraneth of the Zephyrian Empire materialized in the courtroom, her translator working flawlessly as she spoke directly to the human tribunal. "Honorable human leaders," she began, "I speak for the Zephyrian High Command when I say that Scout Yuna's testimony has been verified completely. Your soldier Kim Taeho acted with honor throughout this crisis." General Park leaned forward. "You're willing to vouch for one of our people?" "More than that," Zaraneth replied. "Our investigation has revealed the full scope of what your extremists and ours planned together. They weren't just prolonging the war for profit. They were building towards something far worse. The holographic display filled with classified documents, recovered from the conspiracy's hidden files. Tae-ho's blood ran cold as he read the plans. The extremists from both sides had been working toward a final solution: complete extermination of whichever species proved weaker after years of engineered conflict. Genocide, whispered General Park. They were planning genocide. The timeline shows it would have begun within 6 months, Zaraneth continued. Biological weapons designed to target specific genetic markers. Your Private Kim and our Scout Yuna didn't just prevent attacks, they prevented the complete destruction of one of our civilizations. The courtroom fell silent as the implications sank in. 2 soldiers meeting by accident during a storm had somehow derailed a plan that would have led to the extinction of billions. The tribunal's decision was swift and unanimous. All charges against Tae-ho were dropped. More surprisingly, both governments offered him the same position: liaison officer for the new joint peacekeeping force that would replace the military commands corrupted by the conspiracy. 3 months later, Tae-ho stood in the newly constructed peace station orbiting the neutral moon of Haven. The facility was a marvel of combined human and Zephyrian technology, with corridors that adjusted their lighting and atmosphere for both species. "Still can't believe we're actually doing this," he said to Yuna, as they reviewed patrol schedules for their mixed-species security teams. Yuna's markings pulsed with what he'd learned was her equivalent of laughter. "My people have a saying. The storm that destroys the old tree makes room for new growth. That storm that brought us together destroyed a war that should never have existed." Their friendship had become famous across both civilizations. Books were written about the human soldier and alien scout who prevented interstellar genocide through simple acts of compassion. Children on both sides learned their story in school, but for Tae-ho the real victory was much simpler. He could finally sleep at night without wondering if tomorrow would bring news of another friend killed in a pointless battle. The war was over, not through conquest or surrender, but through understanding. "What do you think would have happened if you'd found a different tent that night?" he asked. Yuna considered the question seriously. "Different soldier might have shot first. Ask questions later. War would have continued. Maybe we would have destroyed each other completely." They both looked out at the stars, where human and Zephyrian ships now patrolled together, protecting the peace they'd helped create. Sometimes the most shocking changes in the universe began with the smallest acts of kindness. "Not bad for a random accident," Tae-ho said with a smile.